Welcome to the very first HM Pinnacle HR Talks broadcast. I'm Heather Mackay, and I am the founder and principal consultant for HM Pinnacle. And I am here with Cara, who I'll let introduce in a second. And we're super excited and super nervous to do our very first podcast together. And it is April, I guess it's the 25th already of April 2025. Cara, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Heather. I'm so excited to be here. So, a little bit about myself. I have about 10 years of HR experience, and that stems from being an admin to a head of people, all the way to becoming an HR project manager, doing all the infrastructure work on the back end, making sure that folks and the teams have the best benefits, the best systems and tools in place to be able to just focus on their work and not have to worry about, am I getting paid correctly? How do I access my information? And then with the generalist work, I've seen it all. So being a part of onboarding all the way to offboarding, the full employee life cycle to include recruiting as well. So kind of just, I call myself the garbage disposal of HR. You don't know where it goes, just hand it to me. So
Okay, I've actually never heard that. I love that. I think we should get you business cards that say Cara, the queen of the garbage disposal in HR.
absolutely, I would take it. And it is, I feel like appropriate because that is what HR does. If someone doesn't know where it goes, let's figure
It
it
goes
out,
to
make it
you.
happen. Yeah.
It's true. I was actually in a meeting the other day explaining HR to somebody because for some strange reason, whenever people go, "Oh, what do you do?" or "What business do you own?" I go, "Oh, I own an HR consulting business." And people, the first thing they say is, "What's HR?" And I'm like, "Seriously? Do you people not know what HR is?" And when you start to tell them, they're like, "Oh, you're the people who hire and fire." And I'm like, "Oh, and we plan events and we
Oh.
do compliance and we do training and development and we do and we do and we do and we do and we do." And they're
Hmm.
like, "You do all of that stuff?" And I'm like, "Yeah, pretty much. Anybody who doesn't know what to do with it, they hand it to HR." And you're like, I don't know why, but we end up with this long list of everything else inside of a company that no one else wants to do.
Yep.
I'm not
And I
sure how that
mean,
happens.
it if it touches a human in the workplace,
Yeah, it
which is
ends
kind
up in
of
our
fun.
plate.
Because yeah, we get to do like some of the not as, I guess you could call it pretty or fancy stuff, but we also get to do some really fun and fancy stuff as well, whether it
We
is
do.
events or employee appreciation or whatever it is. So yeah, it's fun to also get to be able to work with all the other folks in a team, depending on the size of understanding, enough to be dangerous about product or about, accounting and finance. So it keeps things
I do
interesting.
appreciate that though. That's the part I love about HR is getting to be in all the different worlds.
Hmm.
I don't like doing employee engagement or events as much as I think you do. Like that is not my specialty as much. But I like being able to get my fingers into all the different areas and learn so
Hmm.
much about the different areas of the business to be able to really help support them. So I agree with you on that component.
Oh yeah.
So based on that, I'm dying to tell you about what happened last week.
Oh, I bet.
You're never ever going to believe this, right? So this is one of those stories that's going to go in that book that we're creating. The idea of the book is so you think you had a bad day, and it's HR
Mhm.
stories from HR professionals that you'd never believe really happened, but totally did. And it happens because of just what you said, people, right? Because we work with people, and people are absolutely unpredictable. You have no idea what you're going to get every day. And I think that it is unique that each one of us has these kinds of stories. So I had one of these last week.
Okay.
And I am dying to tell you. And it is in my 25 plus year career in HR. This is the first time this has ever happened to me. And that's saying a lot because I've done this for 25 years.
And you've seen a lot,
And
not just in HR, but in other lines of work that you've done. You've seen some pretty crazy things. So if it's crazy for
exactly,
you, I'm
it is
ready.
pretty crazy. So about 4 months ago, we had, unfortunately for one of the clients that we've had a chance to work with, we were doing some layoffs for them.
Okay.
And this individual person, their position was eliminated, not because they did anything wrong, because they didn't. But there was no need for the position anymore. It was absorbed into another role, and there was some downsizing in the organization due to the market. And so the position was being eliminated. The position had become redundant anyway over the last, I don't know, probably 6 months. And they weren't really doing a lot. They were becoming project management. So there wasn't a lot for them to do. And so there were projects being thrown at them every once in a while. Otherwise, they were pretty bored in general. So we assumed they'd seen the writing on the wall that their position was being eliminated as other positions around the company were being eliminated. Obviously, they weren't though, because they were so surprised when we did their layoff. It was
Oh.
overwhelming. They were like, "What?" And I was like, "But you haven't been doing anything for the last like 3 weeks, so we're surprised." But
Mhm.
anyway, we did that, and they requested an extension to the layoff for financial reasons and for benefit reasons, and the owners of the company were great, and they were like,
Okay.
"Absolutely, we'll extend it. We'll give you some severance, and we'll increase your benefits for another month, etc." Which was really cool. So they did all of that, and extended it, and the person ended up leaving, and and the intent was when they left, the conversation occurred, and I wasn't in the conversation, it was just the business owner that was in the conversation, but
Okay.
the conversation was, the position's being eliminated because there isn't enough work, so we don't have anything for you to do.
Mhm.
We're so sorry, here's your severance package, and see and have a good day, kind of thing. So it turns out that this individual continued to text the owners saying, "Hey, do you have any work now? Is there anything I can do for you? Has
Oh.
business picked up over the next few months?" Right. And so obviously the owner should have probably told him, "Hey, there is not a chance for you to return. We aren't going to bring you back." And after, of course, this happens most of the time. After an employee leaves, you realize how much work they didn't do or the things that they messed up on or whatever. But
Yeah.
and so this individual kept texting and this kind of stuff. And so the owner called me and he's like, "Hey, I'm still getting all these messages and he's desperate for work. And he isn't collecting unemployment. And he's asking if there's any other projects we have for him, if any of the owners have any personal projects for him to do because he's desperate for money." And I'm like, we offered to help him look for jobs, and how come he's not collecting unemployment?
That was
Hasn't
going to
given
be
him
my
enough to look for a
question.
job. I know that would have been my question too. And come to find out, he hadn't even tried to collect unemployment yet
Oh
because he was
no.
waiting to come back to work for the company. And I was like, "Whoa, no, 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 he needs
That,
to go collect unemployment, right?"
yes, I
And
wonder where
so
that
I said, "Do
kind
you
of
want me to?"
what
Yeah,
happened. Like
yeah,
where he
you think
thought
he
that
was?
this role was just like a it was a break, not a breakup. So I wonder
Yeah,
what,
I know, exactly. And you're like, we need to be very clear that he's not coming back, right?
yeah.
So, and so I was like, "Do you want me to send him that message, or are you going to?" And he's like, "No, no, no, I'll send him the message. I'll take care of it." I'm like, "Okay." So then another month goes by, and we assume that it's taken care of and fine.
Everything's good. Yeah.
And I get this text message randomly from the owner, and he's like, "OMG, I don't even know what to do, Heather." And I
Oh
was like,
no,
"Okay." And he forwards me the text message. You ready for this?
I'm scared.
This ex-employee, ex-employee has sent a message to his ex-boss to ask him to co-sign on a loan for him because
Oh my
he
gosh.
doesn't have any money anymore and he's desperate for cash. So he's going to go get a loan, not a job, not unemployment, a loan, so he can get some cash to cover his bills, but he needs someone to co-sign for him. So he's
Oh
asking
my
his
gosh.
ex-boss to co-sign a loan for him.
What did he say? What did the ex-boss say? Oh my gosh. What an interesting.
I know. And his text message said, "No one else will co-sign for me." Seriously? Wonder why?
Oh my gosh. Okay. On
And he
one
doesn't even
level,
call to ask. He texts him.
I okay, so many thoughts are happening right now, and I'm trying to digest like where is the first place I want to attack? Because like on one level, I'm like I have so much compassion and like this guy, he really thought this was a break. He thought he'd be able to come back and doesn't have anyone else to help him. But on another level, it's a very unusual thought process to when faced with a termination, think that there is I don't know if this is the right term, but like a position of power to be able to negotiate with the organization and think that you can just kind of come back and also ask to co-sign. Now, I don't know the size of this organization, but that's also the
Small.
danger of kind of that small, if you want. This is where I think it's so hard being in HR because I'm like, again, we love people. Where it was created was because we care about folks.
Yeah.
And then as it gets bigger and as situations like this happen, we create those things that make people not like HR, where we have to say no because we're like, we're setting a precedent for this. This is not compliant. If you do it for one, you have to do it for the rest. And I get it. For the listeners out there, like if you are a business owner, you're hearing like, well, HR always tells me no. I hear you. and I'm sorry, but these are why.
There's a
This is
reason.
why.
Yes, yes, there's a reason why we say no, because
And
you don't want these one-off situations.
yeah, and like, I mean, the fact that there's like the texting there, but I also would say, again, business owners out there, when doing a termination, it's it's just like any other breakup. The more conversation you have, the more you elaborate, the more area of interpretation of, well, maybe they'll take me back. It has to be the same message every time. Thank you for the partnership. This partnership has now ended. Reach out to this generic distribution list for any additional information. And if it continues
Yes,
coming back, say it again. Thank you for reaching out, but this partnership has ended. Reach out to this same email address and never veer from that language because it does open the
absolutely.
door
I
for,
100% agree with you,
oh,
Cara. And that's one of the things
I have
that
chills still.
I
Sorry.
know, that's one of the things that I now realize that I need to do a better job of coaching into leadership is if they're not going to have HR present in terminations, and I'm a big believer that HR should be present in all terminations.
Yeah.
Only because I don't always know that owners feel comfortable in those moments. And
Yeah.
owners want to, they have a heart for every one of their employees and they feel awkward
Mm-hmm.
in those moments, right? And they don't have the same skills and knowledge that HR has to be able to make sure the right words are said. And so they're very apologetic at times.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
so
yeah.
that apology makes that person that's being terminated feel like there's still a relationship there. And
Yeah.
so they don't always use the right words. So who knows whether this owner said something like, "Hey, I'm so sorry, right now we don't have any work for you." Right? Which in someone's brain could make them
That's
think,
right.
okay, maybe later you will. Right?
Yep.
And so it's just an interpretation of words to where it potentially, if HR was in there, it would have been something like what you just said. We are
Yeah.
ending this relationship, right?
Yeah.
And so in the absence of HR being in the space, have it in writing. That's the other
Yes.
thing that I always recommend is have it in writing. And it doesn't have to be a long drawn out, hey, dear Joe, here's this letter of, termination,
Yeah.
but have it in writing. You know what? Today is your last day. Your separation is for this reason. Here's when you're going to get your benefits paid out, your vacation paid out.
Yeah.
Here's who you contact moving forward for any questions, right? Even
Yes.
something as simple as that, just
Mm-hmm.
with the basics, is super important because it makes it clear in the employee's head that this is a divorce, right? This is an ending
Yes.
of this relationship. So that you don't get someone who
Yeah.
continually is asking you, do you have more work for me? Do you have more work for me? That's first and foremost important. I don't even know what to say about asking them for a loan. But the
Oh,
other thing, that one's just out of left field. And this is an
I do. Yeah.
older individual. So this isn't like some
Oh.
young kid who just got out of school and doesn't know not to do this. This is someone who has been in a career for many, many, many years. But the other thing is, I think the other onus, honestly, and I'm not sure, and I want your opinion on this,
Yeah.
is it on the HR and ownership of the company to help an employee understand how unemployment works? And I'm going back and forth on this because I'm wondering if this employee maybe has never been let go or
Yeah.
never needed to use unemployment, so doesn't understand
Mm-hmm.
how it works, and it's their responsibility to go and set up the account and start activating it. And they have to look for jobs while they're on it, and they have to actively seek it out. And I don't know if that onus really is on HR and the ownership when they let someone go to say, hey, here's how you do this, or here's what you need to do. Or it's not their business to deal with it, and this is just the employee's fault for not doing it correctly. And I go back and forth on that.
You and I are on the same like mind wavelength right now because I was thinking about this when you were saying put it in writing and just have something quick and easy. Now, because of my type of role, I am a detail oriented bullet point person. I
Yeah.
always like to have an exit cheat sheet because imagine this
Oh,
individual was completely caught off guard. So after they hang up the call, or if it was in person and leave the office, they're probably like, okay, like what just happened? And to your point, maybe they'll interpret verbal things differently. So having almost a handout, I like to do like I call it an exit cheat sheet, and it will not only include effective your this is your last day, have the date listed. You'll receive your like final pay on list the date. Your benefits will end on list the date. And then you can just, I would say on that note to unemployment education, not necessarily have to go through the here's how you apply and here's all the resources, but even just a link of saying you will qualify to apply for unemployment. Here's a link. And
to
then
get
just
to it.
and
Oh,
just kind of point them to
okay.
the resource, especially if you're in multi-states. There is like a generic link that you can just include on that exit form. And then they can click on it, find their state, apply through the right channels. Because quite frankly, I do think folks, and I have seen this with layoffs, they think that we are in control of whether or not they receive unemployment benefits. And that is not
And
true.
we're not.
It's
We have no say
completely
in
with the
it.
state.
Yeah.
And so even if, because I've received calls of, especially around COVID, when there were a lot of mass layoffs in multiple industries, folks would call and be like, they haven't responded to, I haven't heard anything, but I applied and I really need the money. And I'd say, I am so sorry. We're located here in Texas. When you file with the state, I've heard that they have a backlog of 4 to 6 weeks. And I apologize, but there is nothing else that I can do other than wait for their, you know, um, whether it's a verification form that they send to us. And so maybe also including that, like you can apply with your state, but once the application is done, we will respond in an appropriate timeline, but we can't control when they respond or how that is approved. So,
I love that idea, Car. I think that's a brilliant way for business owners and HR professionals to make sure that there isn't any gray, fluffy areas.
mhm.
So things like this don't happen is a cheat sheet, like just
Yeah.
with the basics, right? So I know that in shocking moments for me, I forget like everything that just happened or the words that just occurred in those
Yes.
moments because I'm in shock, right? And and everyone's had those shocking moments. It may not be a
Yes.
termination or a layoff, but most of us have had some job related shocking moment. But if it's not, there's other things that have occurred. But you forget in that moment a lot of the details. And so having something that you can look back at is a really smart idea. And whether you give it to them in the moment when you do the termination or the layoff, whatever, or if you send it to them afterwards in
After.
an email,
Mhm.
like a recap saying, hey, just a recap from our conversation. I just wanted to make sure you had all of the notes from it. Here's that cheat sheet, reach out if you have any questions, kind of thing. So they also have your email address so that they can
Yes,
communicate with you that way is good too. But that's a smart idea. And maybe that would have stopped this person from
maybe.
doing what they did. But they happen to live in one of the most booming markets currently. So it's even harder for
Um,
me to believe they can't find a job because I just jumped online and there's like over 20,000 jobs in their particular city alone. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? But
but
but you
that's
can't hold their hands. Like you just
you
can't.
can't. There has to be a time where you say, okay, and again, we see this all the time in HR. We are all adults. We do
Yeah.
have, life is hard, and there is a level of compassion and patience that we can give, but at some point, there needs to be self ownership and accountability to take action for what you can control. But I also think this goes to show people when they are desperate or feel scared or are or even angry with terminations, you do have to be very aware and think of all the safeguards you can put into place to make sure that, stuff doesn't go haywire because you never know. And I will say, and this, if we have time for a quick anecdote, it was my
Yeah, go for
very
it.
first termination ever. And my role, I was outside the door when the termination was taking place inside a conference room.
You
But
were standing outside the door?
I was standing outside the door because my job, I had my box in hand for this employee to go to their
No.
cubicle and empty it out. But I was very new in my career. I was still an admin assistant in the HR space, but you know, usually the more bouncer looking individuals were not in the office to assist at this early hour. So after the termination happened, I told this employee, all right, let's walk to your cubicle and here's this box. I will help you clean stuff out and then I'll walk you downstairs. She said, I want 5 minutes with my manager before I leave, because this was with the HR director, and was very forceful. And I am a bit more people pleasing. I want to make sure everyone feels supported. So I was like, sure. She goes
Oh,
into the office and closes the
no.
door. And I just
No.
hear loud voices. And again, in my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, is she going to like physically harm this manager? Is there going to be like an altercation? Like, I did not do my job in protecting that manager. And not only that, but I made it even harder on the ex employee. So let my failure be a learning so that y'all never have to be in that position. Because again, you just gotta make the conversation quick let them process, escort them out, and go about your day. But that was my horror story with the termination. And, lu luckily, nothing happened. I knocked on the door and I was like, we have to go. I helped pack up your stuff and like moved it along. But, in this scenario, again, luckily it wasn't a continued slow burn process with the individual you're talking about. This one was a quick flame. So you never know. Be prepared for what people might do.
Yeah, you don't. And my recommendation is always, because that pointed it out. I am not a big advocate for letting people go to their desk in the middle of the day to collect their stuff. It is
Mm,
so disruptive to the rest of the team, and it is a morale kick in the teeth to the rest of the team.
that's true.
Right. So, because you have no idea what kind of relationships or friendships those people have, it impacts that, it's awkward for them. So I am a big believer that you either exit an employee at the end of the day,
Yeah.
so there's less employees around, at the beginning of the day before more employees come in,
Hmm.
or when you exit them, you ask them to come back after hours to collect their stuff. Those are
Interesting.
always how I do it.
Okay.
Because there's nothing worse than being in a cubicalized setting, in an open office setting, whatever it is, and having everyone else stare at you. And
Yes.
I do it also as the employee who's losing their job, right? Because if I
Yeah.
lost my job, I really don't want to have to go in front of everybody and collect my stuff. It's humiliating,
It
right?
is.
And I don't want that for them. Like, that's uncool for them. But also, I don't want the rest of that team to feel awkward and uncomfortable. So I always make sure that it's done in a respectful way for the person losing their job, by making sure that they don't have to be in an environment where the rest of the team's there.
Yeah.
So, rule of thumb for HR or for leadership, if you don't have an HR department,
Hmm.
is try and always do, unless it's a detrimental situation. And I still think you can, because just escort them out of the building, suspend them, whatever, until there's such a time that you can bring them back in for a termination. But always try and do it at the beginning of the day before most people are in, at the end
Yep.
of the day when most people have left, or if you're going to do it in the middle of the day, just let them know that they can come back at the end of the day, or after hours to pick up their stuff, so
Hmm.
that it's not this big old parade of, an employee leaving in the middle of the day, because
Okay.
it's disruptive for the rest of the day for everybody else who's staying there too.
And then putting embarrassment already on like shock and fear is never a good thing. I do have a question for you though. Have you ever experienced an end of the day termination and the exiting employees like, okay, cool. So you just took advantage of me for an entire day and now you're terminating me? Because I've heard, different approaches to where let's do it at the beginning of the day, pay them for 8 hours of that final day so they feel a little bit of a softened blow. Like you almost pay them for the 8 hours of processing versus if you terminate them at the end of the day, it's like, oh, man, I just worked really hard for these, call it 8 hours, and now you're letting me go. What are your thoughts on that?
So it depends. I get where you're coming from. If they're being laid off, like no
Okay.
cause of their own,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. I am not gonna,
Uh,
I'm not going to do something at the detriment of them, right? Usually if it's a layoff, I'm going to give them as much advance notice. I'm going to pay
mm-hmm.
them for the day and do it earlier in the day. I'm going to pay them out for the week.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of stuff, right? So
Yeah.
I'm going to give them as much as I can, because it's not their fault. It's a layoff. It's the company's decision based on some other factors. If it's a
Okay.
termination for cause,
Yes.
they've done something that is against policy, law, detriment, safety, whatever it is. I'm sorry, I don't have the same sympathy for those people, right? They've done something wrong.
That's
So I
true.
don't feel that I owe them anything in those moments. And so I'm going to do what's best for the organization in
Mm,
those moments, right? What they're
that's a
getting
good
from
point.
me is respect in that termination, by not parading them around through the building, by making sure I'm treating them appropriately in the termination, by making sure that I'm not doing it, usually I don't do it on the 31st of the month, so they've lost their benefits that very day and they don't have anything the next day, right?
That's a good
I
point.
try and
Yeah.
make sure that I'm not doing harm to them, but I'm also not going to go out of my way to cater to them by making it easier on them if they've done something wrong. Does that make
That
sense?
is a very, very good point. Yes, and not all terminations are created equal.
Yeah,
And I,
exactly. And that has to be taken into consideration, because the thing about HR is we juggle that between the employee and the employer, right? And so at the
yeah.
end of the day, especially in terminations, I'm always erring on the side of employer for
Mhm.
the financial component, employee for the respect component. So that's even for layoffs, right? So financially, what is best for the employer, right? When we're doing
Mhm.
layoffs, that's why we're doing them. And respect, how do I do this in a way that protects the employees and gives them the most respect in that process?
Oh my gosh, that is so well said and very thoughtful. And it's always hard to find that there's no way to make everyone happy in these types of things, whether it's a layoff or a termination for cause. People like different things. Whether it's a layoff, they want to know in advance, and they
Yeah.
can be stressed for multiple months. Or it's like, man, no one had any notice, and now I'm shocked and I have no idea what to do. It's hard. There's no way to know the best way to do termination except for, to your point, how can we protect those involved, protect the organization, and then have a level of respect, care, and dignity. And it looks different for everybody, but I do feel like being clear, and you are very good at this, saying things directly so that there's no room for error in interpretation, but then also having that information to empower them so that they can know, okay, I can feel a little bit more secure because everything is so laid out for me in a way that I can fully understand. Um, I think it's really important to do. But I have to ask
Yeah.
though, what happened? Is that the very, like, bringing it all back? So ex-employee asks ex-boss to co-sign for a loan. What did ex-boss say?
So I text ex-boss and I told him, first of all, your wife will never let you do it. But
True,
then I said,
true.
second of all, you'd be setting a precedent. And I said,
Yes.
third, I said, it absolutely you can't. I said, because
Yeah.
you're setting him up for failure because he's constantly going to be he's not looking for a job, so he's constantly going to be, looking for another loan, etc. And he said I wasn't going to do it anyway, Heather. He's like, but I just can't believe he's even asking. And
It
so
is the
he sent him back a
audacity.
message. Yeah, he sent him back a message and he said, I'm sorry, but I don't do loans for anybody, and I'm not able to do that for you. I'm not going to co-sign for
Okay.
anything for you. And
Oh
then
gosh.
he also was really great though. And I don't know that I would have been as great. He sent him back a message. He said, but you know what? If you are needing help with the unemployment office, or if you are wanting someone to look at your resume
Oh
or
wow.
something, you know what? Reach out to Heather because she is there to help you. But he still hasn't reached out to me. So that's on him.
Okay. Oh
Yeah.
man. You know
But
what?
rule of thumb, make sure that you, as an employer or HR, I love the idea, Cara, do the cheat sheet. Make sure you've got the information documented so employees know when they're terminated that they are not coming back, that it is a divorce, that they have the information done.
Oh my gosh. That is I
Wild.
I would be so I wouldn't even know what to say. And like, oh, this is where
Yeah,
sometimes I'm thankful for Google numbers or something because then maybe you can help filter things through. If like in this digital age,
it's
it's hard to have
crazy, isn't it?
separation, but you know what? Good on that ex-boss. It sounds like they handled that with as much care and compassion as possible
If
and
they
even went
could.
above and beyond to
Yeah,
provide resources to this individual. And hoping
yeah.
that individual finds, I hope they reach out to you. I do hope they reach out to you for help.
I do too. I hope they reach out for help, but that was the crazy story of the week. I just had to share.
I every time I think I guess I am getting chills when I think about it. I think because it's like secondhand embarrassment and also like I don't know how to respond. I'm just speechless at how to respond. And
I know.
for
It's one of those
this
crazy stories that's going in the book. So we'll see what next week holds. Maybe we'll have another one of those crazy stories.
I would love to hear it anytime and thank you for having me.